Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second of the concurrent sessions this afternoon. My name is Donal Curtin. I'm a jobbing or freelance economist. I turn my mind to economics of all sorts of descriptions. I have an economics blog, if I'm allowed to advertise. That's Economics New Zealand. So topical issues of the day every day. My connection to stats actually is I've been on one of the panels for a long time where they take input from people about what their economic statistics are like. There's an advisory committee on economic statistics. It's kind of a user group, and we meet a couple of times each year. I've been on it a long time, and have had a great deal of respect for Stats New Zealand over the years for the way that they actually canvass the users of the statistics to see what's usable. One of the things that emerges, and I think it's emerged quite a lot today, is the difference between just the statistics that are produced and turning them into data and useful information for businesses. And the common theme of this session is we've got three groups of people who are taking the raw statistics and turning them into information and intelligence that people can use. We've got three presentations. Two of the presenters are here. Is Paul Murrell from the University of Auckland anywhere in the audience? Yes, he is. In that case, we've got all three presenters here. We lead off with Klaas from Montoux.
Thank you. So I probably should say first what we actually do. So our purpose in life has become over the last few years to make analysis available in a way that is user-friendly, so that people that know the subject, what the model is about, can actually use it. So we've developed a nice little tool that takes mathematical code and turns it into a very nice user interface that then makes it really easy to do something with the data and turn it into information that makes it easy to make better business decisions, really. Let's see, how do I? Where's the technician? Is there a keyboard here? That doesn't work. Thanks. So I'll just prompt you for the next slide. Thanks, Keith. Right. So this presentation is not going to be just about random analysis. This is going to be about one specific type of analysis that we found that is very useful. It's very valuable to our clients. It's one that we offer in a standardized way, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. But what it's about is that business performance can improve if you offer business owners the benchmarking information that is actually relevant to them, and then actually make the next step that is, what a lot of people have referred to today, is then making it available and turn it into information, which means actually presenting the information in their context. So that's what it's about. And why benchmarking? Basically because performance matters. Benchmarking basically tells you where you are, how you compare to your competition. It's a PDF, so maybe that's it.
It's working.
Okay, so, sorry?
It's working.
It's working? Okay, cool, thanks. So, we offer lots of different kinds of analysis to businesses, and even though technically it's a relatively simple analysis, benchmarking offered in a good way, which means good data offered in the right way, presents huge value to business owner because it identifies issues, both good and bad. It tells you where you are performing not as good as the competition, and where you're actually, outperforming the competition. And business owners, in our experience, are really sensitive to, at least not being the worst in class, and maybe even trying to be best in class. Then benchmarking is not only useful at the business owners level, but also at an industry level. So if you take all of the data together for a specific industry, and you look at that, it can actually uncover issues that are industry-wide. Because comparing to competition may not tell you where the industry is actually struggling. And actually looking at the data as a whole, maybe comparing it to other industry, may uncover issues for that specific industry. And that allows industry organizations and policymakers, etc., to undertake action. So, as I said, there's basically two components to benchmarking that, that make it valuable. And one is the quality of the data, and the other one how it's presented. So the quality of benchmarking data is very much around, okay, the data, the market definition sort of for the people who participated to that data, is that close to who I am, what I do? Can I compare myself to these companies or to these people? If so, the closer it represents you, the more value it basically represents to you. The other one is metrics. So business owners, the fact of the reality really is that they're pretty much always in operational mode. They don't very often have the luxury of stepping back and taking a strategic view to their, at their business. So operational data, for instance, what is my, how many kilograms do I produce of a certain crop per square meter, is way easier for them, or way more valuable to them in terms of improving the business than actually salad crops I have been returning more than tomatoes over the last few years, because that's a strategic view that requires change at a way later date. They very much live right now and do stuff right now. And the other one is time lag, and that hangs together with the metric, the type of metric. So strategic information, it's fine if it's a little bit older, but operational information, that really matters right now. How much your competitors were producing 2 years ago for a different crop doesn't matter. How much they're producing right now, that is of relevance, because that tells you how you're doing right now. Because especially around operations, there's always lots of things changing. Now let's have a look at the usability side of things. So that tells us, okay, the previous slide gives us an idea about how to get the data, what type of data we need just to make benchmarking valuable. This is about usability. Again, business owners, they're very busy people. They really like the stuff. When we talk to them, they really need it, but it needs to be very easy for them. It needs to be fast, and it shouldn't be expensive. For instance, I'll give an example. If you present them with the annual enterprise survey data for their market, so you show them a balance sheet, an aggregated balance sheet of all businesses in their market and a P&L, they look at it and they just don't know how to get the insights from it. If you do the analysis around it, it actually it tells you a lot. But you first need to build up all kinds of ratios around, for instance, what is my profit margin? You can get it out of a P&L. What is my return on investment? You can get it out of P&L balance sheet and all these kind of things. You need to do a little bit of work, and then you have to compare it in a consistent way to your own data. And our experience is that that is too much work. They won't do it. Well, only very few. We've created a tool that makes that possible, all of that possible in a few minutes. So we do a lot of that work for them. So, and then also, when you, the report and the type of drivers and type of metrics that you present to them should also be relevant to them. Otherwise, if they're not using those metrics to run their business, they won't use it. So, as I mentioned a few times, the success is basically defined by the quality of the data and how it's presented to them. Fast, easy, efficient, cost efficient, and very much in their context. So that's why we've developed. So now it's online. It's actually, you can buy with credit card and everything, so it's completely standardized. And we've got 2 versions of it, the standardized version. And that uses annual enterprise survey data. So that is, we take the stats data, that the annual enterprise survey gives you balance sheets and P&Ls for different markets, industries, and sectors by INSEE code, and create ratios around that, asks you for your financial information and just creates a report for you in, well, most business owners take about 15 to 30 minutes to create a report that they then can use themselves, so they don't need a consultant in most of the cases to uncover the insights that the annual enterprise survey data actually has in store for them. So one of the things that, the annual enterprise survey data is, like I said, balance sheet P&Ls, so we turn it into key profit drivers, financial profit drivers, into key return on investment drivers. But then, the next question is, okay, I'm different than the market. What does that mean for me? Is that really something I should care about? So that's the other piece of the work that we do for them. We actually say, well, where are you different than the market? So your profit margin is 6.5%, the market performance is 7.5%. If you were to perform at 7.5%, how much extra dollar profit would that give me? So how much does it matter that I'm different? My cost of sale is 10% lower than the market. How much do I actually win by that? These kind of questions. Then the other type benchmarking analysis, what we do, and I alluded to the quality of the data and how it goes up when it becomes more specific, more timely, and with operational metrics. That's what we basically achieve by customized benchmarking. So customized benchmarking basically means, all right, as an industry, we deal with industry organizations. They say, well, we need to uncover some best practices and lift the standards of the whole organization. So we work with the industry organization. They create buy-in from their users and define the metrics that their members, and they define the metrics that their members are interested in. And Zuno basically is the vehicle through which they upload the information and get it back in a way that is relevant to them. So it's very easy. It's like one of the, there's a few criteria to make people participate, and that's, for instance, that you only get the data in return if you give the data. And there's a few others. And it becomes quite cost effective if you get large groups together, for instance, industry organizations of a few hundred people, a few hundred businesses. So that was it. Thanks.
Cool, good afternoon. My name's Tim. I'm from a company called Critchlow, and we specialise in what we call location intelligence, and that is basically taking information, taking data, and laying it out in a way that is spatialised. So I think the easiest way to think of it is to think of data on a map, essentially. And I've got some nice maps which I'll show you as we go through this short presentation. So stats data is, I guess, the focus of this talk. There's lots of other data sources out there that are, free, easily available. One that comes to mind is Lind, but today we're talking chiefly about the stats data. So obviously it's fairly cheap. Often it's free. You can access it quite easily through the fantastic new NZStat data portal. That's a really good tool that we use a lot in our organisation. It's detailed. There's some good depth to that data. You can get down to quite low levels of geography, like a mesh block, which is quite low. And it's also broad, so it's not just your usual kind of demography, it's also income, it's also things like building consent, the household economic survey. A real wide range of topics are covered, which we find ourselves going back to it, quite often to really see if there are things that we can use. Often we think, oh, it probably doesn't exist. We go to the stats website and find that yes, that data does exist, and therefore it can be used in a project. I guess we're all about data and information for business benefit. Often you can kind of get weighed down and just look at, have data for data's sake, but we try and stay focused, and as hard as that is to do, we try and stay focused and look for data that is really going to give benefit. So, got three quick examples. The first is a geodemographic segmentation. Anyone out there know what a geodemographic segmentation is? Cool. I'm the only one. It's basically a way of segmenting the country. Typically you have 30 to 40 segments, and it's a way to describe customers, and I'll explain that in more detail shortly. Profiling, that's where we've got a nice map that I'll show you, and also customer enrichment is another important use of that data. So here's an example of a geodemographic segmentation. We've got two. We've got Mosaic from Experian up the top, and we've got Cameo New Zealand, which is a by picking photos. Basically, like I was saying, it takes the various neighbourhoods and you use the stats data to create a clustering model, and that model you then overlay on a map, and you can describe various areas and use that for purposes like you can do targeted marketing. I used to work for a company that did unaddressed mail, so your standard kind of junk mail. You could use this information to target your message to the right people. We worked with a few supermarkets, and they would use that information to understand who was in a catchment. So you build a store catchment, you've got a new world there. If you define a catchment around that, you can understand who was in your catchment, and if you can tie that back to who was actually shopping in store. Okay. So if you tie that back to who is in store, you can really understand, your penetration into the market. A lot of banks, a lot of telcos, charities use this type of information. So if you've got a customer database, you might append these segments to your database to understand, which types are the best at donating to your charity. If you know who those people are, you can then go and look for more people who look like them, and therefore make sure that your message is going to the right people. This is the map, just a sample map of Palmerston North with some sample data. Those red dots are customer locations. What we do typically in a site location or a profiling analysis is to take those dots, run a sort of a gridding or a heat mapping process over it to look for the hotspots of where the concentrations are. You can see that it's pretty obvious there that the concentration is sort of south of the city around Fitzherbert. With that defined, we can then generate a catchment. So again, this is just a very simple example, but let's say the yellow line is the secondary catchment and the red is the primary. We then overlay other information like the stats data from census, and you can see there we've got, I'm not sure what that is, but I think it might be consumers over 65 represented as red, and the bluer it is, the fewer people there are over 65. So with that information defined, we can then feed that into the catchment. So we can do what's called a spatial query and pick up all the demographics contained within that catchment that you see there. A few actual examples of where we've used this. We've done some work recently with a bank, and they had a few hundred stores, but they had 80 stores they wanted to convert into what they call business banking centres. So they wanted to find the best 80 stores to put their business banking consultants in, and what we did was generated a range of catchments around all their stores. We fed in Stats New Zealand data around SMEs, small to medium enterprise demography, so the number of SMEs, the characteristics of those SMEs. We came up with a table that ranked their 200 odd stores based on the number of potential or the size of the market for SMEs. They could then go through and look at that list and work out, yeah, Ashburton looks a whole lot better than Ekatahuna, for example. So that's one example. Another is we did some work with a supermarket, and they were quite keen to understand within a walking distance of their store what the composition was. So we took some of the Stats New Zealand data around daytime population, so your workplace address, and we looked at how many people worked within the catchment, how many people lived within the catchment. The store didn't have car parking, so we used a model of walking distance, and we could feed into that the catchment and understand the profile of, like I said, how many people worked there and that could give the store an idea, how much space it should allocate towards things like lunches for office workers and so on. Just quickly, a couple of others. Retirement Village, we're working with one of them at the moment, helping them using the new census data that came out yesterday. We're helping them understand where concentrations of people aged over 75 are, and that can be quite useful for making sure that you've got your retirement villages in the right place. Another one which kind of ties a little back to the earlier presentation is benchmarking, doing some work with a market research company, and we're looking at correlating sales in store to the catchment around a supermarket. So you can see that certain products will correlate to certain demographics. If we can then say, you can build a model from that, then understand that there is another supermarket over here with a product, and that product isn't performing, we can say that it should actually based on the catchment composition, should be performing at a level up here. It's now down here. So there's quite a lot that we can do with the stats data. Obviously, without that information from the census, it will be very, very hard to do this kind of information. So certainly appreciate the stats data that we can access. Just a couple of other areas where we've used it. I used to work at Flybuys, and one thing we did there was append Stats New Zealand information, so things like income, etc. would append that to the customer database, and that would allow us to understand a bit more about the members of Flybuys. So you could say that this member here was likely to have a higher income than another member over here, and with that knowledge you can make sure that you're not promoting products to people who potentially can't afford them. And by the same token, you can take that information and build models and understand the correlation between various Stats New Zealand census inputs, so like again age, gender, income, etc. Model that against another variable like spend, and then understand if you were to do a promotion to certain people, how that promotion might perform. We've recently won some awards with an outdoor media company, and that's basically billboards. What we've done with them is we've helped them understand the number of vehicles going past their billboard, so they can say, there are 5,000 pairs of eyes that have the potential to see this billboard, or there are 20,000 or whatever. But not only that, but we can use the census data. You notice I say census data a lot because we do use it a lot. We can use the census data to understand where people live and where they work and model that relationship. So we've got various road networks that we can overlay, and we can predict the route that someone's going to take to work. So not only can we say how many pairs of eyes are likely to see a billboard, we can say that they're likely to come from this location and they're likely to have these characteristics. So quite powerful for that billboard company if they want to then describe to the advertisers what the billboard is like. Gives them a much richer picture to do so because they can really get a handle on the types of consumers driving past. Another one, building consents. We're working with a hardware supply company, and we've taken some data off the Stats website, which is around building consents by territorial authority, and we're looking at overlaying their data and understanding, just how many consents this company is getting and their market share of the consents. So like I've said, we use stats data a lot. We'd be lost without it. And it's not only valuable for us, but it's also hugely valuable for the businesses we help, and also many hundreds and probably thousands of other businesses out there.
My name's Paul. I'm from a university, so please don't ask me about my business model. Right, in fact, I'm going to describe a little piece of software that we made that came about from a student project. So this is use of official statistics for education. Sort of. Right. This is a German price kaleidoscope. The idea is that it's presenting information about the consumer price index visually, right? So the circle is 100%, and there are various categories that contribute to the CPI, and the area of the different categories represents what contribution that category makes to the CPI. Okay, and then there's sort of levels of these categories. So there's these big levels, like housing, water, electricity, gas, and other things. And then within that, there are the breakdowns into those individual categories. Okay, so it's an attempt to visually display how different items contribute to how the CPI is created. Plus, it's coloured, and the colouring indicates what's the change been in the price in that category from a month ago or something like that. So these reddish ones are ups and the bluish ones are downs. Okay? So that's the sort of price kaleidoscope idea. Right. This is a New Zealand price kaleidoscope, which hopefully should look a little bit like the previous one. So this is what a student created. So based on the Stats NZ CPI data, build what's actually called an additively weighted Voronoi tree map, but price kaleidoscope is probably a bit catchier. And same idea. You can see that there's breakdowns into multiple levels there. You've got things like food as a big category, and then you've got individual things that contribute to food. This one's slightly different because you can zoom into a category, so we've sort of done it a little bit differently, but basically the same idea, and you've got your tooltips and so forth. Okay, so I've been told by someone never to show this in front of a class of teenage boys. It's an exercise for the audience to figure out why that is. Get back to that one. So that's what it is and what it does. That's the price kaleidoscope, okay? So what are the benefits of this thing? I'm told that one of the benefits of this is that this is a good way or a useful way of teaching students how the CPI is constructed. Because it's a picture, right? And I don't know about you, but if a table has more than 4 cells in it, then I give up. So I'm happy with pictures of this sort of stuff rather than a big table that sort of shows all the percentages and all that sort of stuff. So this is good. So in that sense, this is a use of official statistics for education, okay? That's one benefit. But what I'd actually like to talk more about is some other benefits of this particular use of official statistics. So we start here with what Stats NZ provides, which is the CPI data in a spreadsheet. With a little bit of work, we get it over to a price kaleidoscope thing, which is what you just saw. So a website that you can click on and hover over and stuff like that. Okay, but I come from a world of academics and a world of open source software, and I work in an open source community. So how I see this sort of situation is that what I've got here is it's this thing, this endpoint, plus it's actually some open source code that says how I did that thing, okay? And how I like to describe this is what we've made is a reuse that is reusable. Oh, okay. So, and partly that's because the code that we use to make the thing is available as well. So go on and you do other things. And it's also partly because in this case, this picture we've made here is actually, it's an SVG picture, if that means anything to anyone. And the way it's constructed, there's a structure there behind this. There it is. That makes it better, doesn't it? Right, so, no, we won't look at that too much. Right, so there's some code in behind the picture, which is also reusable. And it's actually quite structured, that picture, in the code. So the picture itself has been created with an eye to, it's not impossible to reuse the picture as well, okay? So that's a benefit as well, I think, of this particular reuse. And then taking that a little bit further, this idea that if you make a reuse and you can make your reuse reusable, can be taken in a couple of different ways. And what I'm doing here is sort of splitting out the code that we wrote to make the picture at the end included a stage where we wrote something that made these additively weighted Voronoi tree maps in the first place. So that's a separate piece of code that could be taken in other directions, as well as taking the endpoint thing in other directions as well. Obviously, CPI data could go in different ways, but over on the left-hand side of this diagram, what I'm trying to suggest as well is that this idea of not just data but code could be driven back down, rammed down somebody's throat, so to speak, below the level of the data that's being provided. And it would be terribly exciting to people who sit in universities and make open source software if there was not just sort of data coming out of these providers, but also code that was used to create that data. Now, there's a limit to how far down you can go, especially if you're dealing with confidential data. But the example I like to think of here is some political party presents its budget, and it sort of says, we think that the economy is going to do this, and then our budget is aligned like this, and it's all going to work. And then the other political party says, no, it's not, and nobody's got any evidence. And nobody can challenge either of them because there's no sort of information. So wouldn't it be wonderful if they sort of said, we think it's going to do this, and by the way, here's the data set. It's in an XML format or CSV, so you can use it really nicely. And here's the code we used to generate our predictions from that thing. Do you agree with us? And you can replicate or fiddle with it and that sort of stuff to figure out whether you agree or not. Slightly back to the case in point, if there's a calculation that gets to the CPI data, wouldn't it be interesting to sort of play with that calculation and sort of go, well, how sensitive is that to, if I change the contribution of this basket to CPI, what happens? And in an education context, that'd be really fun. Right, so that's sort of the same benefit, sort of said a bit longer. I think that's all I needed to say, really. So that's what it is. It's a price kaleidoscope. It's for showing CPI data and the benefits that it helps you understand CPI, gives you projects for students, and that if you do it a certain way, then you can reuse your reuse. Thank you.